We're also going to be joined by Dr. Mike Salter from AB Agri for this final panel session, where you as audience are invited to add any questions in the Q&A, and I see you are already, which is great. Mike is involved in technology scouting for AB Agri for products and service opportunities, and he's got broad expertise in this sector, and we very much welcome you to this panel. And Mike, your camera hasn't yet come back on. So to kick off, we've got about 20 minutes. We'll try and juggle the questions in the Q&A and have some active debate with everybody that's just spoken. And to kick it off, firstly, thank you to all the speakers. Some clear examples of how IB is making an impact in this world of food and drink. And I'm going to continue to welcome you to put Q&As in there. But first of all, I was going to jump in and turn first to Mike, who I can't see, but I'm hoping he can hear me. Mike, AB Agri have been leaders in food. Oh, Mike, let me just check. Mike, are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, I am. It's saying that it won't let me put the camera on.
Well, we've got your voice, which is what counts. Yeah. So AB Agri has been leaders in food, feed and IB for decades. But maybe it seems that sustainable protein is more high profile now than it's ever been. And you've scouted technologies for a long time. Which technologies or approaches, maybe as part of your intro, excite you most in this area? And how's AB Agri addressing or viewing this sector currently?
So I think as a start point, my name's Mike Salter. I work for AB Agri. We actually have a central innovation team. So within those businesses that Alex explained, we have researchers within those individual businesses, but then we've recently formed a central innovation team, of which I'm part of. And so I tend to look at broad strategic projects, and the researchers within the individual businesses then look at the more tactical products within those particular areas. As you say, I've been looking at this kind of alternative proteins space for quite some time. I've looked with interest at the single cell proteins, obviously, and the meat replacement technologies, but also for AB Agri, we've been looking for several years now. So we actually had a project on insect protein with Vera some years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. So it's not brand new to us, but for me, the technologies that are really important are the CO2 consuming technologies. So if you can use CO2 as a carbon source, clearly that's a really good idea. But I think when you look at what Alex was talking about, particularly about the yeast, so you could argue, well, the yeast actually are emitting CO2, but in fact, that's taking those yeasts, as those spent yeasts, as a byproduct, as a secondary, as a co-product, as we would call it. And I think it's really important that within this kind of biotechnology industry, that there's an understanding that there's a possibility, if they have biomass at the end of a process, there's a possibility that it can actually go into livestock feed, and rather than for humans might be extremely remiss to take this kind of feedstock, but of course for the livestock feed industry, it does represent an opportunity. I think some of the issues, the main issues around trying to move into the specifically produced livestock feed protein sources from the kind of biotechnology approach is always going to be cost. It's very difficult to reconcile. If you drive across middle America, you'll see field after field of soy, and so the cost at which the industry can buy soy is so low, somewhere in the region of kind of $300, $350 a ton, that any competing protein material has to be at a sensible and a competitive price. I think there's, Alex also pointed out the benefits of yeast, and I think particularly as antibiotics are getting taken out of quite rightly, of course, out of the livestock feed industry, it's important that we understand that gut health of livestock is absolutely key. And so these new protein sources if they can contribute to that livestock gut health and really reducing the need for kind of remedial antibiotics, then they can only be a benefit.
That's great. I think in that last point, Mike, you probably capture some of the questions in the Q&A of this choice between feed and food. And I think in the interest, I think we don't have the time to cover that here. So to some of the questioners, we'll maybe pick that up in the Q&A. But maybe to Jackie or to Polly, Mike talks about technologies, and you've really pioneered some breakthroughs in technologies which use a more efficient bioreactor than the animal to make something. But can you maybe turn to Jackie first? Any obstacles you faced in this and anything that's helped you overcome them, and maybe the same question to Polly afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So I think probably one of the key obstacles for the cultured meat sector at the moment is cost. And Northern Technologies is taking the approach that, there's a lot of people working in that space, and we're actually working to try and address some of those gaps. So taking the cost one into consideration is why we've been focused on induced pluripotent stem cells, so that they are generated over time without the requirement to go back to animals. And what we're trying to do with the lines that we've got is to try and make them grow more efficiently and effectively. The other big cost, of course, is the media that goes into that. You don't want to end up spending more on your media to produce a kilogram of muscle cells for meat than actually you can charge. And we're working hard to drive down those costs by scaling up, looking at defining the media, making the media simpler. And in fact, we're working with some people across IBLC. We put some grants in to look at how we can do a more cost effective and intelligent scale up, which then we can take to our clients who use our cells as components for their cultured meat products.
Thanks.
Yeah, so things that have been particularly helpful to us, it's that grant funding to help us. The scaling up is always the difficult step, isn't it? We know that it can work in the lab. Getting it up to commercial production it's not just a put more in and hope for the best. It's there's a whole load of technological issues that I can't possibly answer the questions on. But yeah, so the grant funding to do that stepwise kind of development, but also the grants force you and support you to collaborate with partners as well. So it helps to speed up that development because you've got the feedback from the feed companies, for instance, from our partners who are producing the carbon dioxide. So we understand that side of the industry and where the problems are there. And again, that's an emerging technology, an emerging thing that they're trying to scale up as well. So all of that, we're all sort of developing along at the same rate, and the fact that we all understand the issues that go along with that is really helpful. So being part of a bigger grant project is really useful, that we can just pick the phone up and go, hang on, what's happening here, or what's the deal with that, and it's actually really helpful. So I have to say that the grant funding and the collaborative working ethic has been really good for moving things forward for us in the last year.
I think it's probably worth a little prompt for IBIC. Does a great job of putting some grants out there and fostering that collaboration. So I think those in the audience probably know that, but if not, then do reach out. And maybe just on the same question, maybe a question to Alex and or Mike. It picks up on the theme of cost and value, and I see some questions in the Q&A about technology, but saying perhaps ask Mike or Alex how these technologies fit within a food environment that may have a carbon tax. And do you think it's want to proffer any views as to whether you think government intervention and carbon tax is something that's going to play a role in adoption in this industry? Bit of a hospital to pass to one of you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can have a go if you want, Alex. It's difficult, isn't it? Because if people do not want to pay huge amounts for food. It's a major priority to ensure that food and people see a significant proportion of the population certainly see meat as an important part of their diet and the protein within their diet. And so I think to a kind of a taxation approach would be very, very dangerous for any government. I'm not involved in any way in government, but I think, trying to keep, the important thing is to try and get the technologies down to a price where they can compete with the various protein sources that we as an industry have available to us. I think I suspect it would be very dangerous to kind of put a price on the cost of the food that people eat by having a carbon tax on it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to escape this, because as has been explained by Alex, and hopefully I've explained briefly at the start, we as an industry understand this, and AB Agri and I know other industry members understand that we need to try and work towards this, and it's obvious from the work that Livalta's doing, we are trying to do this. So we're, I think anything that increases the price of food, though, is very difficult to justify.
So let me maybe be more provocative then. The theme of the conference is net zero and impact. So we move on to that net zero. I think we all echo the desire that technology gets there itself and gets to efficient and competes in its own rights. But how fast do you think we can get to net zero? And within the food system, what change or help would you want? And if we are dispelling the government intervention with carbon tax, what would you hope for to make this happen faster or fast enough? And I think Steve Bagshaw and Lord Callanan did a great job of characterising we need to do it fast enough. So Alex, maybe if you want to go first on that one, any desires in that sense?
So I think there are many ways we can as industry do our best to accelerate this process. First of all, I believe the collaboration between different branches of industry is key here. More strategic thinking, but together. For example, if there is a plan for a new plant, let's already plan that CO2 emissions will be used for algae production. So really strategic thinking. Also, what is our philosophy as AB Agri, using all these co-products, all that is typically regarded as low value or waste, we can still put it back to the cycle, and we can still make a lot out of it instead of building completely new processes. So I think there are many things, and of course the communities like this one, innovation people, I think they will play a huge role in really accelerating this process towards net zero.
Thanks. Jackie, do you have a view on the same subject?
Yeah, no, I think I think it's going to have to be working together. I think it's really hard to put a date in it. ASAP would be the thing, but I think there's so many branches to how we can achieve net zero, and I think conferences such as this and regulatory mechanisms push through the system. Someone's mentioned the carbon tax already, but initiatives like that will push us. But I don't think it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to require, cross-industry, cross-legislation promotion to get us there. And dare I say, with that legislation comes a negative impact on those that aren't addressing the net zero issues within their organisations.
And Polly?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've not got much to add, but that regulatory, the policymakers need to be in line with, the industries, those wanting to make the changes. Like, are we allowed to make the changes, and can you please allow that to happen as quickly as we need it to? And then also the sort of investment, the big capex, like, we can't do this with the infrastructure that exists already. We need new buildings, we need new infrastructure, and for that we need investment. So, IBIYC sake, other innovation centres are great on the sort of ideas generation side, but we need that sort of bigger level, down the line, continued investment into these enterprises so that those ideas can grow and can get to commercial scale. So I think that those are the main things.
There's an interesting question in the Q&A there about once industry scales up, and it probably picks on your point, Polly, there seems to be little space, and it's from George Allison, little space for smaller operators, barriers to entry become massive. Would you go with that? And I think from your own company's position in this, you're transitioning from the small company to the big company. So would you agree with George's challenge?
It is, it is difficult to go. lots and lots of people are having ideas in the labs, and we see this all the time, and there's encouragement to spin out from universities and that side of things. But Jackie said earlier, it's really expensive doing it on that small scale, and to make it worthwhile and to make it commercial, you need to scale up, and that's when the prices come down and it becomes an actual commodity in the market, as it were. And there seems to be that mismatch of getting it from the lab right up to commercial scale, and there is support there, but it's hard fought for, it's difficult to access. You need to know exactly who to speak to, and you need a lot of luck, I think, a lot along the way. So yes, there are great ideas out there. It would be nice to see more of them, forging ahead and being able to grow.
It up as a sales promotion for IBIC, but again, the innovation centres, the scale-up facilities help on that journey. We are going to run out of time, so I've got one last question, and we'll try and go around each of you. So I'm going to offer you 2 wishes. So if you had one wish or ask for the whole industry, what would it be? And maybe you've already covered it. And therefore, if there's one thing you wish for your company in the next year, what are you asking for? And you've got a minute each. So Mike, why don't you go first?
Yeah, my camera's suddenly been turned on, which was very good. Yeah, I think I'd wish that, I think as Alex said, that we can work together, because basically, it's about providing channels to market. So you have to go right the way through to get these kinds of products. And I think it's why I'm really pleased that as a business we created Lavalta, because we were creating a channel to market, so that when these new products and these much more sustainable products became available, they've got to get to the market somehow. And with the best will in the world, a company that's kind of designed and come up with a really new concept for a biofermentation system that produces a CO2 consuming protein, at the end of the day, they're not walking down farm tracks. We are, and so it's really important that we all can work together, and that people who are businesses that think they have sources of protein, and think, actually, could we use our byproduct, our co-product as an animal feedstock, both for an increased an improved return for them on their process, and in which case then they can contact people such as Alex, myself, and other businesses within the industry. It's not only AB Agri that's doing this. The industry as a whole, the livestock industry, is trying to do this. So I think it's really that we can just, as a whole space, maximize the potential for these new protein sources and these much more sustainable protein sources.
Thanks, Mike. As we're doing it, and I'm going to Alex next, but as we're doing it, I think maybe all panelists, Mike's message is collaboration. So all panelists, if we can make sure contact details are in the chat, then people can follow up and do this collaboration. But Alex, same question to you. You've got a couple of wishes in a minute.
Yes, I would confirm what Mike said. So basically more and closer collaboration between different branches of industries to understand this common objective and to really work together to get there. So that's my wish.
And Polly?
Yeah, I mean, I think collaboration is a big one. And as I've already said, that all working together, the investment, the backing, the government support, let's push things forward and get things out there. And then my second wish for my company is a very selfish one. I started my job in September and I've still not met any of my colleagues. So I would like to be able to travel and move around the countryside a bit more. Not really specific to this topic, I know, but I think, again, that it adds to the collaboration conversation, like being able to meet people, see people, I think it helps. And that would be nice.
Jackie, why don't you round us off?
Yeah, so finally, I mean, for me, especially with the animal cells work that we're doing and the insect protein, I think meeting more people in the value chain, as Mike said, can we help people with their waste, and how can we put that into better black soldier fly lines and make the connections across industries with the animal cell lines? Can we work with more people with scale up and nutrition? regarding the potential of our cell lines. And I think for our company is the growth. We put a lot of effort in the last 2 to 3 years into developing these innovations, many of them from scratch, and just to see uptake further down the value chain with those, it would be great. So a kind of upscale for our experiments and growth for our company.
I thank you all. Thanks to all the panelists. I think there's a number of debates which are there for another day in terms of the feed versus food debate. And for all the questions that haven't been answered, we'll try and cover them off in a moment. I think the trends there are collaboration, value chains and travel. So maybe some closing remarks. My wish in this area is that we capture this moment and capture the energy for non-animal protein sources, because we have to. And we'll only create, I think everybody's echoed it, we only create impact by having the right resources and that oblige collaboration. And we need to encourage all the talent that is needed to succeed. So I think some great comments in the earlier session and some great energy from people here. I echo, Paula, your message that I fervently hope we can see the success of IB and celebrate the success of IB in supporting the vaccine rollout, such that we can all return to freely travel. I think this conference is a great example of doing it virtually, but there's also some benefits of face-to-face. So thanks to all the panelists. That's going to conclude our session.